Our guests for the next half hour are Roxanna Gapstur, President and CEO of WellSpan Health, Luke Bernstein, President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, and Jim Hoehn, Regional President of PNC Bank. Jim, I'd like to start with you. For those that may not be familiar, can you give us an overview of your company and its economic impact in Pennsylvania?
Well, sure, Francine. Certainly, PNC is one of the largest diversified financial services companies in the country. We are present in the top 30 MSAs across the country. Most importantly, we're headquartered here in Pennsylvania. This is our roots, and this is a market that is most important to us. And the thing about PNC in terms of how we go to market is really we're focused and organized around both the clients and communities we serve. So here in Pennsylvania, I'm one of the regional presidents for Central Pennsylvania, but we have 4 other regional presidents to focus on delivering and accountability, not only to our customers, but the communities we serve. We're some 60,000 employees strong, roughly 16,000 here in the Commonwealth. And we're very focused on both client communities, as I said before, in terms of what we do. So thank you.
Roxanna, tell us about WellSpan Health.
Yeah, so just came to Pennsylvania about 4 years ago to be the president and CEO here. We're about 20,000 strong at WellSpan, serving 6 counties across South Central Pennsylvania, 8 hospitals, and about 2,000 employed physicians and advanced practice providers. Full continuum of care in the communities that we serve, all the way from hospital care to ambulatory to home care, and also have one of the largest behavioral health organizations in the United States at WellSpan Haven. Here in South Central Pennsylvania, we have about 200 inpatient behavioral health beds and about 35 outpatient programs.
Luke, what can you tell us about the Pennsylvania Chamber?
The Pennsylvania Chamber is the statewide voice of business. We advocate for job creation and economic growth to improve the lives and the economy in Pennsylvania. And we have approximately 10,000 members that are businesses and private sector members all throughout the Commonwealth, every region, every size, every industry, every sector. And our collective membership is responsible for about half of the private sector workforce in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so collectively, our voice advocates to create a stronger Pennsylvania, stronger economy so we can all prosper together.
Luke, how would you describe the business climate in Pennsylvania?
I think it's one where I think when we take a step back and look at all the incredible offerings here in Pennsylvania, we have so many wonderful attributes throughout the Commonwealth. We have world-class educational institutions. We are a state that has been built and thrived on innovation, manufacturing, and others. And for us, I think the one thing that we need to really focus on is how can we get our economy moving and get the right economic and business climate. So there's been many movements in the last year that have really positioned Pennsylvania more competitively, and we need to continue to get competitive. And so when we look at areas in terms of tax reform and other pieces to the economic climate, we can absolutely do a better job in those areas. But when you look at Pennsylvania as a whole, and you look at our energy and our financial sector and our healthcare system and our academic institutions, we are second to none in so many areas and have so much opportunity right here in the Commonwealth.
Roxanna, what has your experience been like doing business in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, well, really interesting question when it comes to healthcare, considering we've just ended a pandemic, or we're hoping to end a pandemic soon. Actually, really good. So, great workforce, very committed people. I think that the administration and the help of the chamber has really pushed forward some policies that can help business. WellSpan, we're very conscious of the fact that, we're often the largest employer in many of the communities that we serve. In our last report, we infused $4.6 billion of economic benefit into the 6 counties where we have services, and provided $330 million of community benefit. So it's something that is always on our mind, and we work closely with the chamber and others to make sure that we have business-friendly policies here.
Jim, what has your experience been like?
Well, I think the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we're very fortunate that we have such a diversified economy in the Commonwealth, and also some just amazing, great entrepreneurs. And I think one of the things that we have to keep focusing on is really keep to help the companies that are here continue to thrive, to exist on multiple fronts, whether it be workforce, whether it be access to capital, but also to work with the small businesses that ultimately become the middle market businesses, that ultimately become the large corporate, because there is a life cycle. And one of the things that I'm delighted to work with the Chamber about, as well as with PNC, is that we're working with all of the entrepreneurs across the continuum to help them thrive not only today, but for tomorrow.
What do you think makes a given state attractive to businesses?
Well, I think the access, first of all, to the population sources, and Luke will correct me if I'm wrong here, but we're right here where we sit today in central Pennsylvania, but we have access to some 100 million different consumers in the United States from where we're at. So access to product, both in terms of resources coming in as well as the ultimate buyer of those products, is great. The academic institutions that help provide the workforce for what we have here in Pennsylvania is amazing. As well as we've done a much better job of helping to create even those employment figures that don't necessarily need a 4-year degree. So whether it works with community colleges or the Thaddeus Stevens of the world to help companies like mine or health care institutions like Roxanna's, I mean, all the resources, both inputs and labor, I think has really helped the business here do great.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the pandemic, from that healthcare lens, and what Jim's saying really strikes a chord with me. When we think about, we were in a manufacturing area, luckily for us, because that really made a big difference in our supply chain, especially when China shut down. So just having access to, as you said, the workforce, the academic institutions, but also the businesses in our communities who are willing to sort of retool and redesign to help other portions of business was huge for us during the pandemic.
And Lou, you touched upon some of this as well. What makes Pennsylvania attractive to bring businesses in?
Right, I think Jim and Roxanna brought up very good points about our proximity, our infrastructure, our open and access to different capital markets throughout the United States. So for us, in addition to having ports, the infrastructure here in Pennsylvania opens us up with its proximity to the nationwide population. We can be within 1 day's drive of 2/3 of the population of the United States. That gives us an amazing competitive advantage to move our goods, to market our state, and to attract new people into our state. And so for us, I think that's a big competitive advantage that we have, that you can't just pick up a business and move elsewhere and have that type of advantage. So it's that we talk a lot about workforce. Workforce development is something that is on the top of mind for every CEO, every business in the state. And so for Pennsylvania, we have a very dedicated workforce in all regions of the Commonwealth. And I think our innovation is one thing. When you look at every corner of the state, whether it's life sciences in the Southeast region, innovation in the Southwest region, and all across the Commonwealth, everywhere, innovation has been a driving force for Pennsylvania, and I think that's something that will continue to set us apart.
How does Pennsylvania compare to other states in attracting businesses, and are there things that you would like to see changed perhaps or modified to help bring more businesses to the state?
Yeah, I think we can be more competitive. Oftentimes you hear about businesses maybe from New York moving from New York to Florida. You don't often hear of a business from Florida or North Carolina moving to New York. Same as Pennsylvania. So I think for us last year, in a bipartisan manner, we were able to get the corporate net income tax reduced from 9.99, which was the second highest in the country, only to New Jersey, to 8.99 effective January 1st. That was with a Republican-led legislature, a Democrat-led administration. And I think when public policy, you can have two entities come together and work in a bipartisan manner, especially in today's climate. It's very powerful. And so that bipartisan movement is really going to make Pennsylvania more competitive. It also continues to take, that agreement will take the corporate net income tax down to 4.99 by 2031. There's been advancements and discussions even as early as recent as last week to expedite that reduction, and the incoming governor, Governor Shapiro, has also said he would be supportive of that, because that is going to impact not only our population. Every point we reduce shows an immediate impact positively to net population. It also allows businesses to reinvest here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But it's not just that. There was a piece to that that helps small businesses. And, as Jim talked about earlier, many of the businesses, not only in Pennsylvania, but throughout the country, small businesses are the backbone of America. They are the backbone of Pennsylvania. And so the small business tax reform that was in it is going to help the whole state, not only healthcare industries, financial service industries, but every industry throughout Pennsylvania, because those small businesses can reinvest right here.
Roxanna, I'd like to come back to something that you brought up, the coronavirus pandemic. How has the pandemic changed your workflow?
Oh, in so many ways, it's hard to even remember now because 3 years ago, we really started redesigning. And as you remember, we were given a lot of regulatory flexibilities during the pandemic to be able to care for people in different ways. One of those was through telehealth. And that waiver has, of course, been extended now federally, which is wonderful because I think people now are much more interested and also used to perhaps getting care in different ways. So that's one huge way that it changed our workflows. It also forced us to really think about innovation in our supply chain, as I mentioned earlier. And so we have a much more diversified supply chain today, both local and national and international, in ways that we really weren't thinking about before the pandemic. And then finally, I would just say the workflows for our teams, of course, have changed significantly with the amount of personal protective equipment and things that our teams, of course, need to wear still on a daily basis. And we're hoping that at some point those kinds of requirements will die down. So,
now, Jim, some may not think of banks as being as directly affected by the pandemic, but has your workflow been altered as well?
Well, I think it has, and in several ways. Maybe I'll speak this in two parts, both how we see it within the banking industry at PNC, but also we're very fortunate because we deal with so many businesses to see into the window of others. But for us, I think it really accelerated the adoption of the digital world. And so many of us have the iPhones or the Androids, the mobile devices at this point in time. But for us, a vast majority of our customers these days, their primary vehicle to deal with this is digital. And so we've had to begin to adopt that transition of how we deliver for our customers. And Roxanna and I were talking about this just in the back room a little bit. But you have to have the continuum of preparing for today and tomorrow in terms of delivery, whether it be branch, mobile, or otherwise. But at the same time, you have to kind of bridge the gap with your current client base because not everyone is ready to leap over into the full digital world these days. So I think that's from a pure banking standpoint, that's one of the cases we've seen. Dealing with businesses, their world has also gone a lot more digital online. And as they're looking to deal with, we haven't touched on this yet, any sort of inflationary pressures or economic issues, everyone is looking to become more productive. And so working with customers, I know how we work with customers, it's looking to be how do you examine what in fact you do to begin to take cost out, but at the same time make sure that the client experience is equal or better than ever before. So I think that whole process of, as we're looking at businesses, has really taken hold at this point in time and trying to increase that productivity. And as Roxanna alluded to a little bit here, is that supply chain has come into that. One of the challenges with the global disruptions of supply chain is even if you were fully committed and had the capital to bring in some things to increase productivity, frankly, you haven't been able to because supply chain disruptions have slowed the adoption of some technology and some productivity enhancements. So that's something we're dealing with right now across the board with our customers that we're seeing. But I think for the most part, businesses have done a truly amazing job of adapting and getting the productivity enhancements. It's really going to serve them well coming down the road.
Luke, anything additional you'd like to add regarding how Pennsylvania businesses have adapted to the coronavirus pandemic and what this means moving forward?
Absolutely. Jim mentioned the advancement of the digital front. In addition to that, I would say that financial institutions, especially in Pennsylvania, became the financial first responders during the pandemic. And in the early stages, we thought this was going to be maybe 2 weeks, 5 weeks, we're going to be back, and it continued on. And there were so many financial institutions like PNC and others that stepped up for their clients in delivering PPP loans. Everyone became an expert on SBA programs, on the EIDL program, other different things that kept small businesses and communities going in times of challenge. And so that was an incredible thing to see from the financial services industry because people were working around the clock, 7 days a week to help local businesses, to help people employed. And it wasn't just about the business. This was about keeping people paid on the payroll so they could continue to go on and we could get through that pandemic together. So the financial service industry stepped up in a major way. And the healthcare industry. And obviously, I mean, this was a new front of what something many people in this country had never experienced a worldwide pandemic. And it was our financial first responders on the financial side, but it was our healthcare first responders that really got us through the challenging times in the face of what at first was a very scary situation. And through calmness, driving forward and providing that healthcare outlet and doing so many different things to make people feel safe, not only in the community, but when they came to the hospital settings, healthcare settings, and felt better about it. I think for us in Pennsylvania, one of the biggest challenges that we saw through the pandemic is we lost about 250,000 workers that left the workforce during the pandemic. And to date, only 50% have returned. And of the 50% that have returned, the biggest segment that has not returned has been the 35 to 18-year-old demographic. And that is the part of the workforce that we need to get back into the workforce, because every state is having workforce challenges. Pennsylvania is not immune to that. And so for us, getting people back into the workforce, and while the unemployment rate is low, the participation rate is one that's really important, because when you're seeing so many people leaving the workforce, it's going to be important to get them coming back to the workforce. But I would just say some of the challenges of the pandemic, some of the silver linings, the financial services, the healthcare industries, really stepped up in ways that were pretty unimaginable and helped our communities get through a significantly challenging time.
Jim, I'd like to come back to you. Have customer expectations changed as a result of the pandemic?
Well, I think that the looking for greater access has changed. So from that perspective, yes, I think that we were prepared to do this, but I think there was an acceleration. There was probably 5 years of adoption that came into the 1 year. But customers still want to be taken care of, and businesses as well. I do think the one thing that we're seeing more and more businesses look to do is really integrate a lot more of information and technology of things that are normal banking, payables, receivables, to integrate with their own systems, so both have greater information, greater efficiency, and ultimately greater security. Because what we did see in the pandemic is that, unfortunately, the fraudsters came out of the work. So I think it's even more important that both consumers and businesses really safeguard themselves, utilize the tools that their bank, including PNC, have to utilize with them, things like dual authentication, and making sure that you're just being careful. PNC's website has a lot of information to help you protect yourself. Your own financial institution likewise will have this, but be on guard, because the fraudsters are out there, both on the consumer and the business front.
Roxanna, a similar question for you. Have healthcare consumers changed their expectations since the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. Similar to what Jim mentioned, a big acceleration in telehealth and digital health. We had been using many of those tools before the pandemic, but really the adoption by both providers and patients was fairly slow before that. So just as an example, we did about 2,000 telehealth visits the year before the pandemic. The first year of the pandemic, we did 545,000. So it was just exponential. After the first week of the pandemic, we knew we would have to accelerate that work, and so we did that. I think understanding people's need for and want of the digital technology is really important, because for some patients that just doesn't fit for them. And so having an omni-channel strategy now in healthcare is pretty common, I think, where you're seeing people get service in many different ways. But I will just mention the patient portal that many health systems use, similar to the banking portals, has become the main way now that we interact and engage patients. And the portal at WellSpan actually is one of the best in the nation. We had been retooling that even before the pandemic. And now what we're seeing is, you can see all your imaging results. You can see your entire chart. You can get your lab results in the emergency department waiting room really at the same time that your physician's getting them. So we're seeing quite a few changing expectations for quicker, faster, more accurate information for patients.
Luke, how would you describe the economic conditions in Pennsylvania?
I think overall, there are areas that are very strong. And overall, there are some areas that need improvement. And so from a regulatory reform process, permitting reform process, that's something that really needs to be enacted in order for the public sector to allow the private sector to do what it does best. And that's innovate, create jobs, and continue to grow here in Pennsylvania. The new governor just 2 weeks ago, 1 week into office, announced a new Office of Transformation that is laser focused on cutting the permitting time, focused on getting people from throughout the governor's administration to partner, to collaborate, to work together and find ways to limit the regulatory time. So the second best answer when a company applies for a permit is no. The best answer is obviously yes, but the worst answer is maybe or we don't know. And it just sits there and waiting. So we've supported legislation, have worked with in a bipartisan manner to support legislation to codify some of the governor's proposals that would allow projects to get on a certain timeline. There are new resources at DEP now that would hopefully allow for DEP in the field to review things on an iPad, similar to what you'd expect in the private sector, and say, yes, this is all good. We can have advancements without sacrificing any environmental gains and really bolstering on the environmental side. So there's a way to do everything. In terms of the climate, I think for us, there are real opportunities in Pennsylvania because of the workforce, because of the proximity, that position us more effectively than some of our neighboring states. And a big part of that is the financial services industry, the healthcare industry, and the energy sector. Pennsylvania is the second largest producer of natural gas in the country. Pennsylvania is the second largest exporter of electricity in the country. And so when we're looking worldwide at energy costs, we have all of the above here in Pennsylvania. It's all of the above in renewables, solar, wind, go right down the line of energy supply here that I think any other state in the country would love to have. And we have it right here. So that gives us a real competitive advantage.
Roxanna, what would you say are your greatest challenges in doing business in Pennsylvania?
Well, right now, since the pandemic, certainly workforce and the regulations that Luke just mentioned about decreasing time for licensing is a key one for us. Because as you can imagine, we have many licensed professionals that we'd like to get right to the bedside, providing services for patients. And that's been a challenge for the entire healthcare industry in Pennsylvania, as some of those times have really drug on. So really excited about that particular regulation and what it could do for workforce in healthcare. But I would say that's probably our number one challenge right now. Luke mentioned the number of people who've left the workforce. As we all know, a lot of the people who've left have been women, sometimes moms after the pandemic. And so some of the work that the Early Childhood Investment Commission is doing and others, we think is going to be really important to getting those people back to work.
Jim, what have your greatest challenges been?
Well, I think, first of all, we do as well as the communities we serve. So I think macro issues are really what we face. And I think this whole workforce issue, I think the back to work post-pandemic, Roxanna pointed out to it, one of the biggest issues is workforce for us, for our customers. And it's really getting that, there's a broad global 1% decline in workforce participation across the country. As Roxanna pointed out, many of these folks are also women. And sometimes it's because they have no place, the caregivers, for their quality care of their children. So a number of us serve on the Early Learning Investment Commission, which is a bipartisan group here in Pennsylvania. But it's really so critically important. So it's not only going to help the kids, but it's going to allow the parents to go to work, increase the overall wage of the family. And at the same time, we're going to allow some quality care to be done for the children. So 15 years down the road, these kids are going to be far better prepared. In the meantime, the whole family is going to be working well. So this is a great issue because this is a cross-the-aisle issue. I mean, we're all for left, right, Republicans, Democrats. How do we best help the children? In this case, it's helping families and it's also helping the businesses in the Commonwealth.
Do you think employee expectations have changed over the years?
I think that it has. Is certain functions have gone virtual by the very nature of the pandemic. I think we're in that transition back to office where possible. I think what many organizations have found, including mine, is that things worked great for those functions that could go virtual. But over the course of time, the collaboration that's a hallmark of PNC and many companies, the collaborations amongst functions, how do you coach the next generation of experts in your industry and how, with new people into your organization, that begins to be not quite as effective on a virtual front. So I think we're all grasping a little bit about what is the best mechanism to have, what is efficient, what is flexible for the employee base, but what is critical to the culture of each of our organizations and ultimately how we serve our customers.
Roxanna, similar question to you.
Yeah, similar challenges, I think. We took about 5,000 employees remote after the first week of the pandemic. So anyone who didn't need to be on site providing care, and I know many health systems did the same across the Commonwealth and the country. And what we're seeing now is just that hybrid and remote environment. How do we balance the culture and the collaboration with the need for flexibility, because I think what we're seeing, at least in our workforce, is people value that flexibility that they've had throughout the pandemic, and so we need to keep elements of that as we move forward.
Are there trends that you see either in the economy or perhaps your industry itself that make you optimistic for the future?
Yeah, I think so. I think at least in our own data and some of the data that we've seen in the Commonwealth, we're starting to see vacancy rates and turnover rates come down, which is a real positive. So for about a year, they continued to go up in the wrong direction, and now we're seeing that turn. I think there's been a bigger focus on employees, team members, and what they need, and I think that's a positive for the industry. And we've seen some loosening of the supply chain as well, again, with diversification. So that has also really helped our business.
Jim, back to you. Any trends that you've seen?
Yeah, I would think that, we're sitting here in the first week of February. The Fed has just increased rates. There's a lot of forecasts to talk about, who knows really what's going to happen, but maybe a mild recession coming down the pike. We have a glimpse into many, many businesses across the board, and I will tell you that the overall performance of these businesses has been amazingly resilient. And I think people have learned through the course of the pandemic and other situations over the past decade to be flexible, to be resilient. I think the balance sheets are better. So from what I see in terms of the economy, yes, there may be a mild recession that may take place. We'll wait and see on that. But I think that the overall business owners and managers have done a great job of managing their business to be able to adapt to the situations that are in front of them.
Luke, I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, no, I think resiliency is a great word to describe the situation we're in. Roxanna is talking about what WellSpan did to not only be adaptive but resilient through a really challenging time. I think as we're looking at this right now, you're seeing a lot of reports in the news and almost trying to talk us into a recession. But I can tell you from our members' perspective, to a person that is on a hiring committee, whether it's the CEO, the HR director, they are looking for talent, they are hiring, they want to expand, they want to grow. We are starting so many new innovative industries in Pennsylvania, like Rocklidditz and Lidditz, like Aurora out west with the autonomous vehicles. There are so many things that are happening right here, and they are trying to hire. They're trying to hire talent. Roxanne needs new nurses. Jim's looking for, PNC's looking for folks. Well, every business I'm talking to, by and large, is growing and focused on continued growth. So I'm optimistic about our state today. I'm optimistic even more so about what we can become, and really excited for it.
Our guests have been Luke Bernstein, President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, Roxanna Gapstur, President and CEO of WellSpan Health, and Jim Hoehn, Regional President of PNC Bank. We appreciate all joining us today. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.